walk me through a bit of how it works. Did you get free rein as to what you might choose?
Well, I was permitted to sort of walk into this, the hollowed ground. It's like fantastic space. And the thing about spaces is that they're almost like recording machines for people's lives. And so when you walk into this space, I swore I could hear an old woman coughing when I walked in. The ABC radio was playing and the objects were there.
The station as well,
That's it, yeah. The whole vibe was just, it wasn't eerie, it was like comfortable, but I almost expected to be thrown out at any point.
It's like the great thing about being here for a month, I was here for a whole month, was I kind of went in every Monday or Tuesday and had a look around. And after a while I realised, because I also had a Margaret Olley catalogue with me and I was looking through that a lot, is that there are so many items in there that never featured in her paintings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like really, really interesting objects.
Yeah.
And so after the initial phase of, these are the kind of pictures we're responding to and thinking, oh, well, that's in that one, that looks nice, the jug, because she kind of sticks to the jugs and flowers, which is great. I love jugs and flowers. But you go into that space and there's a weird bird on wheels, So I went, there's a weird bird on wheels. I can't not paint that. And then ram also, where does that come from? So, after I sort of relaxed into it a bit, I thought the essence of Margaret is still there if I'm painting something that she didn't necessarily actually paint.
Yes,
Because it's such an eclectic space.
Yeah.
I think objects and things, they leave behind some kind of presence of the person that's loved these things. And so when you go in there, you do get a chill. I wasn't lucky enough to have gone to her house in Paddington when she was living there. So seeing this like that, it was like, yeah, I've seen the photographs and it's quite eerie, but beautiful. Quite honoured actually to sort of, as soon as I took my shoes off and walked in there and chose something,
Yeah. And what would attract you to a particular object?
Oh, instinct, I think. It's interesting because there's a statue that I know that Margaret Olley loved Degas, and I love Degas a great deal too. And it was a way for me, apart from all the flowers and jugs and vases and fruit and things, it was a way of bringing back the figure into the painting. And when I saw that statue by Degas, I thought, okay, that's a beautiful statue. I would love to paint that. Yeah. And of course, Margaret donated a beautiful Degas drawing to the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
She was incredibly philanthropic and generous. Well, it's interesting that one of the objects that both of you and Margaret depicted in paintings is that the blue and white jug, which I think Ingrid said they call it the Portuguese jug because it was, I think it says made in Portugal on the bottom. I think she was saying, and so they identified. So if people can see this, Keith has got a good example of it there, but it's in that painting behind you, and the actual jug is on that table. So later, it's hidden behind there, and you
it's
can
quite
actually
beautiful.
see the jug.
And it's an interesting one to paint because it's obviously the flowers painted on it are hand painted. So there's there's a rhythm to them that's not constant.
Right.
Which makes it, as a painter, you're sort of looking for that shape, and if something has a pattern, you can use that to build the form. This is all over the place, but that's a beautiful challenge,
Yeah.
And the shape reminded me a lot of Margaret as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It just did. I mean, just the physicality of it, So I was drawn to it. It felt very comfortable being around that.
Yeah, and I noticed you used it as a vase with it, so everyone said that's the one on the end there. Which you're very well known for is your flower paintings, and whereas Keith, you have it solo in this painting here.
It's interesting actually because Robin and I spoke earlier specifically about that jug, as artists do. We both struggled with what was around that jug. That's the only piece I think in that whole arrangement of mine which I went over the background twice. I had the horizon not straight and I had it a different colour, and I liked the way I painted the jug and I didn't like the background, and I painted it out a few days later and did something else, and then I didn't like that, and I actually did it a third time, which is very rare for me. I'm usually a one-go alla prima painter.
Yeah.
And then I said that to Robert, and Robert said...
I had to resort to using black because... Nothing else worked with it. It was like it's such a strong, dominating shape.
It's got a power.
It's got power.
And was that
just like Margaret?
Yeah, that's right. So she caused a bit of trouble for both of you. But So would you have been with that work? Does that mean you went over in black, or did you just think I just need black in this one?
I think I had something else behind it, and then as I was painting it, I thought I'll worry about the background at the end. And then I looked at it and I thought, it's not going to work unless I put black behind it to make it come forward.
Yeah. And also I noticed that, in that work, you've got something that you do in a lot of your works, and that is a reference to the memento mori.
Yeah.
With that
petal on the
petal on the table. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I think the thing, Francis Bacon said something beautiful about flowers. He said the reason why they're so beautiful is because they die. I mean, you buy these beautiful flowers and 3 days later it's in the bin, it's gone. It's like, but while they're there, they're beautiful. And I think all beautiful things are like that. They're sort of sad because they are beautiful, and because, it only lasts a short while. And there's a lesson there somewhere, I think.
Well, I mean, it's a thing that's been repeated in art history over many, many years. And it's very poignant, and I can see it in your work. And Keith, why did you decide not to put anything else with that?
I often do that with my still lives. I actually think, we mentioned that both Robert and I worked in animation, but I also worked in illustration, and I find that always comes into my still life work in particular, because, obviously I'm in charge of the composition.
Yeah.
And a lot of my illustration was doing magazine covers, and they have to be punchy.
Yeah,
so often composition is just front and centre, and I can spend a long time setting up a still life, but if the object's one of those kind of objects, it just ends up in the centre.
Yeah, it's got a bit of personality. Yeah.
And I actually like that bold composition where it's just, here it is. There's not a lot to that composition. It just works.
Well,
nicely.
composition, it's so important, I feel like, in still life, isn't it? And you're both, you work in landscape and portraiture. Do you find, Robert, that you spend a lot of time with... You've got flowers that you're thinking about as well. Do you grapple a lot with composition with still life?
Well, one of the tricks that I employ is that I set something up and then I go away and do something else. And then I come to it and I'm usually surprised because I've forgotten what I've done, thank God. And so you set it up and you sort of go for a walk, go have lunch, come back in the afternoon. And as you walk in, you go, oh, of course, there it is. And then you see it in a new light. It's as if someone else has set it up for you. It's as if you've walked in someone else's house and there it is. And so you come to it with this fresh, you're not self-conscious about the whole setup, And so you see it from a different angle and you see it in a different light and it's just completely different. And you also bring your own little, whatever it is that you've been thinking about all day, you bring that to it as well. So
that's really interesting. And how do you find with portraiture that you sort of have any trouble with composition with portraiture?
Well, I guess portraiture essentially requires the same sort of compositional understanding or development. But for me, portraiture is quite different. You're talking about working from life, and I'd almost never do a still life not from life, but the practicalities of portraiture in this day and age means that I do have to work from photos a little bit.
Yeah.
Or quite a bit sometimes, people don't have time to come back every day.
Yeah.
So that I think that it's interesting because I do find that will impact on your compositions, and they get a little bit more predictable.
Well, I suppose it depends. If it's just a head, usually it's quite limited as to what the composition's going to be. Anyway.
Yes, that's right.
Although you've done sort of two people and they sort of looking in different directions. Was it?
Yeah, that was a real challenge. Yeah, I did two people for the Brisbane Portrait Prize a few years ago. Twins, identical twins actually, which was an interesting challenge because you've sort of got the same person twice, almost.
So what was the problem with doing that?
Just getting two people in the picture to make the composition sit right, and make them look like they're in the same picture, which isn't instantly obvious.
Did you paint them both at the same time?
I did initially.
Yeah.
But then
it's almost impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Luckily, they're good friends of mine, so I could sort of, work.
I tried to paint my good friend Nicholas Harding with his wife sitting on the couch. So painting two people at the same time, I almost had a heart attack. No, because they were talking, and every time I looked up, it was a different picture.
Yeah.
So it was like basically like wrangling cats. It was like, like there's this detail, there's that, and then all these different emotions were happening, and then different rhythms.
In the end?
I never finished it. I've got this unfinished painting.
Was the couch in it?
Yep, the whole couch. They were both sitting together. I wanted it. I had big ambitions, and Dana will tell you, my wife will tell you, I was a mess.
Well, it's a bit of pressure. I mean, Nicholas.
Well, yeah.
And Lynn
Oh no.
Watkins,
I'd painted him many times before.
Yeah.
But never with the wife together, and where they were like talking and being and just being, and that's what I wanted. But I just didn't have the talent.
But it's a lot of. I think that is a lot of pressure as well. Yeah. Now, what about lighting? So, can you tell me, Keith? Lighting's very important, and light in a painting is very important.
Well, lighting's particularly important to me. I'm a bit obsessed by controlling lighting. So in the past studios I've made sure that I control the lighting. So it was interesting here actually because when I first came in, there wasn't particularly strong lights in the studio. So after a few days, I called my friend Connor in Brisbane and said, bring a strong light down from my studio, can you? And once I got that light, it actually really started flowing after that.
And what are you after when you're using and manipulating it with light? Do you want shadows to work?
Well, you can tell the first one that really worked for me is the fruit. And that was the day after Connor bought me the light, and I just had a much stronger light so that I feel comfortable when an object just sits where it is, and it's going to sit where it is if it has that good contrast shadow just sitting on the surface that it's sitting on, just on the surface that it's sitting on. So you can see in that one I've just dug in the shadow on that side, and suddenly everything's sitting down properly.
Yeah.
So yes, lighting, very, very important.
Yeah.
You could almost have an argument to say that an artist is defined by their light, and I think every artist has their own light. So for you to say that you've brought your own light, I brought my own light as well, but both our paintings are different.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It doesn't matter what we use at the end of the day, it comes filtered through.
Do you have quite a strong one?
Yeah.
Mine was a strong one.
Yeah. Harsh shadows. Yeah. But your paintings look exactly the same as you do, as the ones you did here, as the ones you do at home.
Yeah.
I mean, because your light, your sensibility, your own music is like, it's consistent.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I really hit my stride with this residency. Being here for a month, it was like the first week. I don't think there's a painting here that's from the first week. It took me a while to hit my stride. And, the lighting was a big part of it. Yeah. And then once I hit my stride, I was away, and that's, finding my own light, rhythm in the space.
You've got a very sort of end-of-day light to your work, a kind of dusk.
It feels a bit diffuse as well.
Yeah, it's got that very quiet end-of-day quality.
Yeah.
That must be your personality. No, I don't mean that.
Maybe.
As a pejorative.
Well, I do. It's. I thought I did get into a bit of rhythm.
Yeah.
And my rhythm was do some sketching of the pieces. Maybe sketch it onto the canvas.
Right.
Then go and have a beer at the Imperial.
Yeah. Right.
On my bike, and then ride home. And it's actually a brilliant setup because I didn't know anyone there.
So you're better in the afternoons?
Yeah. But it was a perfect setup. I couldn't do that in West End where I live because if I went to the pub in the afternoon, I wouldn't come home. But doing it here, I didn't know anyone at the pub. So I'd literally have 2 beers, ride back, and then I was just away, just working. It was brilliant.
I'd be asleep after 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk to you about a particular one, and that is jar, which is in that second of the two. It's the one above.
Yeah.
So it's three objects together. And so just on the topic of composition that we're talking about, I find that those sort of paintings, they seem very deliberate.
That one, it's interesting you point out that one and say that's very deliberate, because that's the day the photographer was coming.
Right.
And I thought, I better do something really safe that I know I can do, because they're going to have photos of me doing a painting.
Oh, right.
So that was like...
Demo.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But like I went, what do I know how to do? You know, I'm not going to do the bird on wheels, because that could really go off the rails. So I thought, I love doing glassware.
Yeah.
You know, it's there and it's not there. I love it. And I quite like ellipses. I don't know, it's like they're tough, but I'm comfortable with them.
Yeah, right.
And
that's so interesting. You've fallen back to something safe where you know and you feel safe. Yeah.
But then, you know, it's probably not my favourite painting in the collection, but then it's, you know, it's on the catalogue and it's already sold.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it?
It's good. I like it. Yeah. I like it more now.
Are there any that you've made, Robert, that are safe?
Do you know the reason why I'm facing this way? So I can look at Keith's work rather than facing that way. I mean, it's everything is just, you look at it and you go, oh, look, there are good things and bad things, and it just drives you crazy. So it's best not to look sometimes. You know?
Oh, no, I love them. In fact, I wanted to point out one of yours, and the one on the bottom of the first two that we see on the left.
Yeah.
And now I think that one's called Olley's Table 12.
Okay. Is that the one with the black background? Or?
Yes, with the black background.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So another black background.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, those glass, vases are just so beautiful for reflection and everything like that. It's almost like an abstract painting in itself.
What happens is when you have vase and you have water and you get the light changing and breaking objects in it, it forces you to look, and then you become aware of how the act of looking is quite strange. The stems are broken in the water and so forth. So you become aware of that, and all that sort of stuff is what creates pleasure in looking.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's beautiful when you, speaking about your work, we spoke earlier, that one with the blue background and the two pairs in the front. I just love that one.
Yeah.
It's like everything's fallen into place, but that's got the beautiful jigsaw puzzle of the water has refracted everything or distorted everything within the jar and is still showing what's behind it. Yeah. I love those moments.
Thanks. That was painted supercharged on caffeine in half an hour.
You didn't go to the Imperial before that?
No. Coffee's my drug of choice.
Well, that's interesting because I wanted to talk to you about your technique.
Yep.
And anybody who sees these works close up will know that Robert uses impasto paint, like in a thick texture, and it's very luscious. And I've always wondered. I know that you do these in one sitting, so these would have been done like in a day, I presume, each one. Yeah. So it made me think, you must have to be in a certain frame of mind to attack the canvas. Yeah. So do you have to wait for that, or
No.
how does that work?
It doesn't always work. The thing is, it's like you become basically supercharged by life and by looking, and so that sometimes when you go into the studio, you just bang it out, and it comes very easy, and you're not even aware that you're painting, and you don't even remember painting. I think the paintings I don't like that I've done are the ones I remember painting, whereas the ones where I've forgotten that it was actually done by me, I think are actually the best paintings. I feel like I'm not responsible for them. Who's this Robert Malherbe guy? I don't know. It's that sort of feeling, and so they're there, and it's a wonderful feeling to sort of see them in the abstract. But the ones that, I don't know, make me feel uncomfortable, the ones where I remember I struggled with this bit and I did this bit and it was like, oh, it wasn't really working. I mean, I would take a blowtorch to most of my work if my wife wouldn't, stop me.
It's just ridiculous you saying that when I look at all these paintings. They're just fabulous. Yeah. So you don't have like music going or anything like that?
I always have music going.
Okay.
Music's very important because it makes you less self-aware, or else I'm like aware that I'm in the process of painting, and I don't really like that. You know? I like being lost in painting.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah, totally. And what about you, Keith? Do you ever is it hard for you to get lost?
Oh, I get lost all the time. And sometimes in painting.
Do you need anything in the studio that's a constant?
I have music, but not always. There are a few people here who've shared studios with me, and they'll attest that the morning will be ABC radio with the talking, and I'm not necessarily listening to it. It's just a bit of hubbub, and then the afternoon will be music. But yeah, like Robert, the best painting is the one where the background's not really, whatever's happening in the studio is not really occurring to you. You're just lost in the paint. And there's that special moment. I mean, I know from Robert had the studio up until a certain point in time, and then I was the next person in. So there was evidence of Robert everywhere.
I scrubbed.
But it was great. Ingrid showed me a picture of what it was like when Robert left. Yeah. And his palette is a bunch of paper plates and this and that thrown everywhere. It was completely shambolic. I mean that as a compliment. Because I am a completely tidy, organised person. My palette is religiously kind of set out with little bits. Before I paint, I'll get up in the morning. My palette has been scratch clean the night before. Wow. I get all my paint back out from the day before. I keep it in the freezer. I've become obsessed by keeping paint. And then I'll lay it all out, and I will spend an hour before I paint just mixing the colours that I think I'll need. I'll adapt after that, but I'm a very methodical person in that way. And so to see the evidence of Robert was really inspiring, because I thought, wow, it's such a different way of working. It's so beautiful. And there are times where I think, I'd love to be a little less methodical. I mean, I don't think I'm always methodical once I've got the brush, but
right, no,
but my palette is methodical.
Yeah. So you prepare a great deal.
I do.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the sketch is done. Right. Sort of pastel pencil.
Oh, that's interesting. I never draw before I paint. Well, I might put a slight indication as to where things are, like a few lines, and then I just go to it with the paint. So basically, I'm drawing with the paint. Yeah.
I have a little Perspex viewfinder.
You're kidding.
That a friend gave me about 10 years ago in Melbourne.
Wow.
Because he was doing some work experience at a place that cut plastic, and he gave it to me, and I went, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And I don't know why, ever since, we were talking about still life being about composition, I just always make it into 9 squares or 16 squares and have my viewfinder and sketch it on. So I have an accuracy that's there in the pastel pencil sketch, and then I can just attack it with paint without thinking about where things are.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. What about with portraits? Would you do a study, like an oil study or something like that?
I do lots and lots of studies with portraits, yeah. Some portraits can have, 12 portraits before I get to the one I like.
Wow.
Yeah. But some work straight away, and then others have a lot.
Yeah. And I think you're a bit more instinctual with portraits, aren't you?
I free fall into it. If somebody turns up to sit for me, I kind of know what they look like, and I've made up my mind about their personality before I start. So, and this is very important. I would only paint somebody I like. I would never paint somebody I didn't like.
Right.
So it's interesting, Robert and I have painted the same person.
Yeah.
Oh, who was it?
She couldn't be here tonight. She's in the UK.
Sarah Holland-Batt.
Yeah. So we're very different takes on the same person.
Yeah. Well, I met her through you, and I just thought, I have to paint this person.
She's a big personality.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they're very different.
They are.
Yeah.
Completely different.
But I think both successful pictures.
Oh, yeah, no, yours is beautiful. Yeah. The thing about, the way to approach a painting, for me, a portrait, is you like the person, you look at them, and then you go, well, how do I create an image that shows the entire person, but at the same time, if their mother was to see the portrait, they would go, that's my daughter, or that's my son, or that, they would know straight away. So it has to have a likeness, but not for me a photographic likeness, but a kind of like, that's definitely her, or that's definitely him, that sort of thing. And I'm always looking for that moment in people where they're lost in thought, or there's something where you're reading something in the eye that can't be photographed, because it's more than just a fleeting thought. There's a whole thing going on. Yep. So that's the sort of thing I'm trying to paint, and it's so difficult to sort of put all that.
It's such a subtle thing
in one go. Yeah, and people. I mean, look, people who look at paintings will see that, but people who are used to watching TV might not see that. They don't know what they're looking at. They'll go, oh well, I don't know. It doesn't, because if, photography is so. Such a strong, powerful, graphic, medium. We have it in newspapers, magazines. It's on your phone. It's on your TV. And so, people, when they stand in front of paintings, it takes them a while for the brain to just go, "Oh, what am I looking at? Where should my eye go?" And I think there's so much pleasure to be had from standing in front of these paintings. You'll see these paintings in books all your life, but when you stand in front of them and your eye travels across the surface of these paintings, it's a very different thing. You realise why they're good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you're talking about these paintings behind us of Margaret Olley's, because she painted like these in the 60s and the 70s when this was not a fashionable thing.
No.
And she just didn't care, and she was going to do what she wanted to do. And in fact, some of these, compositions are sort of Cézanne-like, which in the 60s abstraction was all the rage. And I just was wondering what your views were about, trends and fashion, and whether they're even fashions anymore, because we're so exposed to so many things.
I've always had the feeling that, in terms of painting anyway, you can have these people that have this contemporary idea or a crazy idea in paint, and it might be really in fashion for a while, and then it might not be in fashion. But something like still life or portraiture is never in fashion, so it can't go out of fashion. It just will have a constancy to it. Like, if you are good at it and you keep doing it, you'll find your audience, whereas someone who does something a bit crazy or expressive will suddenly get an audience, and then that audience will move away to something else in a little while.
Yeah, true.
Well, I think one thing that'll never date is mark making. I mean, the actual making of a mark on any kind of surface. So regardless of whether it's genre-based, like a still life, or figurative, or landscapes, what we're drawn to as humans is marks on any kind of given surface. And I mean, it's right there in the caves, isn't it? You go and look at those caves and the paintings. These are beautiful marks that are put together, and we still get goosebumps looking at these things. And I mean, the whole idea that there's a difference between drawing and painting makes me laugh. It just comes down to what medium you're using, but it's still the same process. You're putting down this mark, and then next to it you put another mark, and then next to that another mark, and all of a sudden you have an image. And I don't think, as long as people like making marks, I don't think anything's going to change that much. Something else I'd like to add is that what Margaret does with her objects, and what I think I've been trying to do with that's quite similar, it was that I think she would choose all these different objects, different things, and she'd create little private secret dramas. Yeah. I think there's a lot of secret narrative going on there, and I think it's almost like she's like a stage director, and she's got her cast of actors, and she's creating a little story, and which is, I think she's been influenced by Morandi, who lived in his, basically one room all his life, and painted, these beautiful objects, where I think he would hear his, sisters arguing in another room, and then create a little drama out of that, and the still life out of bottles and jars and things. And I think, Margaret did similar things with that. Whatever was going on in her life, I think that we're almost looking at a diary here in these works, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do something like that with some of the objects, and I'm not a narrative guy, but I tried to do something like that.
Yeah, right. I wanted to talk a little bit about the residency itself and having a residency here. I know I ran into Sarah McDonald and Sophie Perez. Oh, there they are. They're actually in residence at the moment.
Lucky you.
And Sarah, yes. And I know, and Sarah did this great video the other day on Instagram where she's getting ready for the residency and what you had to do, and that was a really good video. So, can you tell me what sort of preparation? Like, did you sort of think, oh gosh, I've got to take this whole truckload of stuff with me, or was it?
I did that. I mean, because I tend to do that anyway. I tend to sort of have more paint than I need, have more canvas than I need, and then still I thought I'd overdone it, and still I was going to the art shop and buying more paints, so it was crazy,
Yeah, right. So you can't fully prepare, you don't think?
No,
You're never quite sure what it's going to be like once you start working. I mean, I'm a bit luckier than Robert, given that I'm just up the road in Brisbane, and I did have to call people and say, can you bring down this or that.
Yeah.
But I did bring a lot of canvases like Robert.
Yeah. I suppose you're not in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. There's an art shop.
Yeah.
There's a hardware store.
Yeah,
you can adapt.
Do you feel like you've got to come with an open mind as to what's going to happen?
I think if you don't come with an open mind, you'll probably get trouble. And, like I was saying before, I don't think there's a painting here from the first week. That was just settling in. I actually did heaps of paintings, sort of 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres.
Oh, okay.
I did about 20 or 30 of those in the first 10 days or something like that.
That's a good idea.
I love doing tiny works like that because you can't put any detail in. But so I did quite a few of those, and sometimes I felt during that early time like I'm not getting enough work done because, the show's not going to be 10 centimetre paintings. But it just so prepared me for what was coming and allowed me to get comfortable in the environment in a painting sense. So I think it was a good method really in the end.
Do you feel pressure at all?
Well, I think the worst thing that you can do is think about what other people have done. And
when I arrived, they showed me what Robert had done.
Oh no!
That's pressure.
Actually, that's awful.
Sorry, mate.
Somebody's just finished a whole body of work and you're just starting. Oh,
well, the other strange thing, it's totally my fault, but when I arrived, in my head, the show was in November. And then I got the booklet that actually appears in one of my paintings with the Margaret Preston flapper on the front.
Oh, yeah.
I got that booklet and I flipped through and went, oh, the show's in August, not November. And then they showed me Robert's paintings and then I started, a meltdown.
You started with a 10 by 10. Yeah. No,
well, it was okay. And that was my misunderstanding. But I worked it out in the end. It was all okay.
And what about sort of loosening up? It's like, say if you need... I know you're both landscape painters. Did you feel, I'm just going to go out and do some landscape on one day just to sort of loosen up a bit or to have a change?
I did quite a few. I read the newspaper and when I've read it, I'll do a picture on it. So I did quite a few landscapes of that scene just in charcoal and whitewash.
Yeah, right.
And it was really good fun because it was really different to what I was doing with the still life. So it just, it's still good fun. It's still art, but it's not. I'm not overdoing it on the still lives. It was a good break.
Yeah,
bit of a break.
No, I did 3 landscapes when I was here, only because the landscape's so beautiful and I just couldn't resist. I would have done more, but I thought I better not,
I thought do what I'm here for.
Yeah.
There was one bit down here on the bike trail I so wanted to stop and paint it, and I didn't.
I'm coming back.
Yeah. Well, Keith, you're also a sculptor, aren't you?
I'm obsessed by sculpture at the moment.
Are you?
Yeah, I love it. I did a residency earlier in the year in New York in a foundry, and I'm just really enjoying sculpture.
And the figure, it's basically the figure.
They're mostly figurative, a lot of busts.
Okay.
Yeah, I just really enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that just would take you away. Like, you could come back fresh after doing something like that.
Yeah. I'm going to have a show of sculpture, so that's sort of why I'm concentrating on that at the moment.
Yeah, right.
So, just delving right into it is a real break from painting, but I was telling Robert earlier, I'm missing painting a bit. You know, I'm in a sort of studio situation at the moment where I can't really paint. So that's making me miss painting.
Does it make you feel like when you go back to it, how do I do this again?
It probably will, yeah. Although, you know, painting's a funny thing. You know, sometimes it is, I think Robert and I both have that idea of going pretty quick and it's going to be hit or miss.
Right,
you know?
right.
Even when you're doing it all the time, you'll have that day where like the painting doesn't work, you know. And so when you come back to it, it might work and it might not.
Every day feels like the first day in the studio.
Yeah.
It always does. But there's this back catalogue of things that you can fall back on, you know, like it is, you know, but it always feels like, you know, the excitement of the first day.
Yeah.
I find it difficult to understand those painters who would never stuff up a painting, you know. Some
they
painters
have. They have. They just don't think they have.
Yeah.
Well, you've got, I mean, I think we've spoken about this before, but like you've got to have some sort of self-doubt to some extent, don't you? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm racked by doubt.
But then at the same time, whilst you're in the work you're doing, you have to believe in it 100%.
Yeah.
I do. You know.
What do you mean by that?
Then maybe once I look away, I decide it's not good. But while I've actually got the brush in my hand, I have to believe in that work.
Yeah, I think, you know, look, all artists are similar in that we have this very strong idea of what beauty is, and that's the guide, you know, that we go with. You know, every time we do something, there's the part of our brain that's developed that said, that's not beautiful, that's okay, or it's mediocre or whatever. But when it's beautiful and it hits those marks, you can't even explain what those marks are or what that is. I can't even tell you what beauty is. I mean, I just know it when I see it. So that when you paint a picture, you just, you know, that's what leads you, you know. I don't know if you feel the same.
Oh, I feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be interesting with the painting. I suspect you're the same, that sometimes you can be doing this work and it's not feeling quite right, or, you know, you're struggling maybe, whatever it is, but you're still moving along, and then like 1 or 2 marks or 3 or 4 marks and suddenly it comes alive, which is just the most beautiful thing. So that, you know, it's those times that keep you going, maybe on other paintings which don't work out, keep you going to the bitter end, because you think maybe 3 marks will work it out. It's
so interesting, isn't it? Actually, one last question, and I think this is for artists, and this is probably more for portraiture, I think, because you both are trying to achieve a likeness. Because there are different tricks like artists use to try and see with fresh eyes. And I would love to know if you had one tip as to how you do that.
Fresh eyes. I don't know, I guess a little part of my practice is that I always work with a big mirror behind me, so that I can just spot it from a distance and flip.
Yes.
In an instant, just by turning my head. I so obsessively use a mirror while I work that when I work on plein air, I will be painting a landscape like this and I'll go, no mirror, because I'm so used to doing that.
Do you know what's a good thing to do if you're going to do that on plein air? Is get a pair of binoculars and look at it the wrong way. So then the painting becomes smaller.
Yeah.
So you just look at binoculars the wrong way, and then your painting, it looks like it's very far away.
A surrogate mirror.
That's right.
Actually, that's a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I do when I'm painting a portrait, and I think every human being has got a different rhythm to their face. And when you sort of look for that rhythm, I think Matisse said this, when you find that rhythm, likeness seems to fall into place very quickly. And so, of course, it's not going to be a passport photograph of the person. It's not going to look like, the computer won't sort of be able to put it together and go, that's so-and-so. But it'll have that rhythm and you'll go, oh, God, that's definitely so-and-so,
Yeah, that's so interesting. Oh, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. You've given us all some great insights into your work. And I hope a lot of people, if this is on the podcast, I hope a lot of people can make their way to the gallery to see this wonderful exhibition. Congratulations again.
Thank
Robert
you, Maria.
Malherbe and Keith Burt.